You got to see the houses. That's what your $3,600 provides. There is no option anymore for houses without plumbing. So the $3,600 buys a house with plumbing. The first question asked last night was, how can you build a house like that for $3,600? And that is a good question. There probably is more money involved, and so additional funds that are donated for Food for the Poor go to that, but they have chosen to identify that figure. They are built with day laborers, and that's a goal down there to put people to work. So they try actually to dissuade people from coming down and actually doing the physical work instead of the money spent on airfare. And if you ever get to go to Port-au-Prince Airport, you won't want to go back. But the money spent on airfare, travel, and all the rest of that could be spent for houses that put people to work in the construction down there. The solar, it looks like little flashlight bulbs strung across the ceiling and coming from the one panel on the roof. And you saw at the family's dedication of their house there's also a cistern and a gutter, and they were catching rainwater as well. So those houses also are built to withstand 150-mile-an-hour winds. Some would say Haiti is a very God-forsaken place because both earthquakes and hurricanes are routine there. Most government buildings were destroyed back in about 2005, I think was the year, by earthquake, and so there really is no functioning government there. Transportation is by private owners of pickup trucks who haul people up and down the streets and pile them in and on top of the trucks and on top of the hoods and everything else. It is a sight to behold, but it is also a sight to behold people who are grateful and thankful and happy, it seems, and all kinds of religious symbols. Not only are those pickup trucks that go by, but storefronts and everything else. So a religious people. The Catholic Basilica there was destroyed by that same hurricane. You would think the Vatican, with its fairly abundant resources, could rebuild it or would rebuild it. They have not, and it likely never will be. So it remains a symbol, but in all the fallen things, the fallen materials from the building, the cross inside remained exactly where it was and still is a very, very visible symbol in downtown Port-au-Prince. So instead of me telling you more, any questions or information you'd like to know about Food for the Poor? Phyllis.
I have two questions. How do they choose who receives a house? And what kind of jobs are there for the people there so they can earn a living?
Okay. The selection process works a bit like Habitat for Humanity here, where you have to get on the list, you have to attend the training and the workshops, you have to go to the educational things about home ownership, then you have to invest in it, time, usually no money because they have none, but time and labor in that, or other houses in these smaller communities that are often, that's a common thing and probably a good idea, one house here and one house 30 miles away and sort of thing, but instead building clusters and building villages. So very similar to what Habitat for Humanity does, with certainly an emphasis on family. Same question was asked last night here, and I answered to the best of my knowledge, families have priority. I'm not aware of anybody, a single person receiving a house, but that the emphasis is in hopes of bringing up the next generation from poverty, that families with children are emphasized on the homes and who gets the homes. Food for the Poor, so far this year, it said in materials this week, has built 1,490 homes in a COVID year. So major accomplishments and achievements down there. And to your second question, what was?
Well, what kind of jobs are there available for people?
There really aren't a lot, and that's the unfortunate part. Now, almost every time there's a village built, there is work done to produce gardens and grow food for that village. If they'd given you a little bit bigger tour of that warehouse in Port-au-Prince, which has to be guarded. It has watchtowers. The bus sitting there had a truck parked behind it. That's the bodyguards. That's the crew that goes and accompanies every group through the city, because it is a dangerous city. The work options just seem, the funny thing was, everybody seemed to have a cell phone. Not sure where or how, but everybody seemed to have a cell phone. And not a lot of work. Lots of individual small shops, and there's people selling gasoline along the streets and things like that. The part of the issue is there's no real working class. You have then no tax base, so no tax base means no government provisions, and it's a vicious cycle. This was once one of the gems of the Caribbean when it was under French control, and say into the 1800s, but generally considered the poorest nation on earth at this time. Yes, Food for the Poor they're feeding more than ever right now as a result of the pandemic. And of course, it's true in all the countries that there just is nobody that's been spared, neither the richest or the poorest. They have to deal with that too. That's why I think it's amazing that a year where COVID seemed to rage, by March already in this year, that they've built almost 1,500 houses, still been able to accomplish that this year. Well, those end time lessons, the day of the Lord, I liked what that one lady said there. She said, never put off what you can do today. The day of the Lord is described in Amos and in Paul's writing as a kind of a scary event, a worrisome event. And that's not where Jesus would have us. Jesus reminded his disciples, let not your hearts be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. And he spoke those words with real assurance and with real certainty. We share those words at a funeral, and so those are end times according to this life's journey. We've all got our fixed spans of time. I would doubt that any one of you or I sitting here today will exceed the age of 105, so we've got a fixed lifetime. If you do live to be 105 and I'm still around somewhere, give me a call. I'll come and help you celebrate. But we've got fixed time frames. The day of the Lord is an unknown date. The people that Matthew was writing to believed it would come again in their lifetime, that this Jesus who was taken up into the heavens in Matthew 28, and then the disciples hear the angels speak, men of Israel, why do you stand looking up into the heavens? This Jesus who you saw taken up on the clouds of the heavens will return. It's the same thing that Paul spoke about. He says Jesus will return, and he says those who are dead will be raised first, and we will then join them. The speculation is interesting, of course, and it produced all the Left Behind series. And this is a text some would say is about the rapture, but the word rapture is never used in scriptures. That's not a scriptural word. The time and the methodology, we get some glimpses, but that's not where our hearts or our lives or our efforts are supposed to be directed. The fellow celebrating communion there was also the one who spoke the words something about this is the day of the Lord, a special day for a house dedication, a special day for a family whose lives will be changed forever. The group REM in 1987 produced that song, It's the End of the World as We Know It. And I don't even know what the specific reference might be there. That they were writing their song about. Many people have thought that day had appeared. In Michigan with their football team right now, I think it's kind of the end of the world as they know it. I'm glad it's not Ohio State. March 15th and the COVID shutdowns certainly has changed the world as we know it. There were people that were worried this past Tuesday that the world would end, and the world as we know it continues to exist. The interesting part of that song that they wrote was, "And I'm fine with it," was their next line. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I'm fine with it. That suggests an assurance for us, a comfort for us. Don't spend the time and the energy there. Spend it in this life. Spend it on this day. And so last night I suggested to people today, as you go home, make a phone call to somebody who you know is not coming because of COVID right now. They are very much lonely and shut in and homebound. I made a visit on Friday, and I said to this lady who is herself homebound, I said, give another person here, and told her the name, give her a call. She needs a call from you. Make something of this day. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We will worship in it. We will serve in it. We will care for one another in it. About that coming day, no one knows the time. Jesus reminds us that it's futile to even try and get the calculators and the calendars out to make guesses. Don't spend the energy there. Spend it on making somebody's life much more meaningful and livable, as in the Food for the Poor projects, or a Habitat for Humanity house that's scheduled here for West Carrollton next year, or things like that. Remember that axiom, and I don't remember who that quote is attributed to, that when I'm gone, I hope I've used up every last ounce of energy in me. I hope I've used up all the gifts and talents that God gave me. I hope I don't waste any of them and end up taking them to the grave with me. So this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice, and let us serve, and let us work, and let us in gratitude live as God's chosen, God's faithful people by baptism, the ones who will join God in that day when he comes again, as we confess in a few moments in the creed. He will come again. We say that with certainty. We say that with confidence. That's the end times of the church year, the last few Sundays of the church year. It's also pretty much the message of Advent as we await his coming, not only at Bethlehem, but his second coming in time. The peace of the Lord be with you always. Amen.